journey, Jord. So excited to have you on. And Jord was my second guest on the Dharma journey, and now you're going to be my 22nd guest, sorry. And yeah, we first, like in our first episode, we talked about a little bit how like our childhood affects our adult relationships and kind of the process we've been going through the last 2 years, and about overcoming our own challenges, and kind of the the podcast today is really going to be now looking at the things that hold us back from truly experiencing more joy, more love, more wholeness. And I know this is something you do in your work. Jord's a self-actualization specialist, so we're going to get into that. And also, the topic today is integrating our shadows and how this can show up in our lives, and really kind of understanding, what is shadows and why are they so hard to uncover. And I know it's been really interesting in my own life since, living with you and being in a relationship with you, and kind of not being able to escape from, seeing this like mirror. And I think a lot of people can relate when we're in relationships. Our partners really hold up that mirror to us, and we realize so many things about ourselves that we don't really understand when we're not in a relationship. So yeah, maybe you can share first, Jord, a little bit about your process into shadow work, and really give the listeners a little bit of an overview about how you got into this area of work, and how yeah, it showed up for you in your life.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast again. And I love talking about this topic, so very excited. Yeah, how did I get into shadow work? Good question. It's basically because I went through a massive breakdown in my life, like a nearly fatal breakdown of my health and my nervous system. Um, but that didn't get me into shadow work. What got me into shadow work is that I identified myself up on that moment as someone who was really aware about himself. I think I got my first book in regards to like personal development and stuff when I was 14. Um, and I carried a lot of pride around that. Like I was so proud of myself that I did these things. And I was good at playing hockey, top sports, and within that, um, within the team, being like the captain and always having that leadership role. And then later on, obviously, like building my startup company and becoming that successful entrepreneur and identifying myself with it. And I really thought that I knew everything, especially about myself. Um, and then I had this breakdown, and it was so confronting. You were just speaking about that mirror, and that breakdown was my mirror. I was in a hospital bed. I was hospitalized for a couple of weeks, and I was in quarantine for over 3 weeks. And I was just there with myself and looking back on my life, and the conclusion was like, I don't know anything about myself. Um, and that was such a breakthrough moment, and that was the start. And then um, the start of me getting into my own shadows, wanting to understand the coping patterns that caused all the stress, and well, to myself and to other people. And so I got on this journey to really, really understand where it comes from and how we develop these coping patterns, and how it can be that a person like me can study personal development, leadership, psychology for like over 10 years, like really diving into it, and then crashing yourself into the hospital because you're not aware of your own, well, toxic and destructive coping patterns. So yeah, that is what got me in yeah, shadow work, or whatever we want to call it, developmental psychology. And I ended up being really good at doing the work for myself and eventually with other people. So yeah.
And for those who are listening that don't know, I forgot to mention Jordan is my partner. We're in I'm in my office and he's in his office, so we're doing it on this Sunday afternoon, and we were like, how can we bring value to you guys? And I think we know in our relationship how powerful like learning this work just mainly for ourselves. But obviously, Jordan does it a lot with his clients. I do a little bit with mine, and really seeing how these like blind spots basically are taking over our life and kind of ruling the show because of things that have happened to us maybe in our past or in childhood, and we've, you know, somehow adapted in a great way. You know, our minds are very intelligent in that sense, but they serve us at a point. But then we get to adulthood and we get to like relationships, and then they kind of start to be, you know, limitations and actually hold us back from greater love and joy and acceptance. So maybe you can share as well, like, what is a self-actualization specialist for any of you who don't know, like, what's that kind of, you know,
That's just another part of my current shadow. I have no clue. It's just a fancy title that I made up for myself to explain what I do. Um, yeah, I've been looking for a long time how to which title to give myself, but I came up with like self-actualization specialist because that's what I do, and it refers back to the Maslow's pyramid, to the hierarchy, um, where a lot of people, including myself, are looking to actualize their potential, and they all think, and I thought that there was like an a top-down process that was just about doing more and creating more, growing more, etc. And yeah, the journey of self-actualization actually requires you to go inwards. It's not about outwards growth. It's really about going inwards. And often what stops us from actualizing our true potential, which I define as being able to realize our dreams and goals, and at the same time really experiencing a deep connection of a deep sense of connection, fulfillment, and aliveness in the present moment. I think there's two. It's not just about growth, what a lot of people think that's what we tell ourselves, or what's promised, that when we grow and finally when we reach a certain point, that then we will feel connected, and then we feel fulfilled, and then we will feel confident to make certain decisions. But it's really about that, like, yeah, hand in hand process where you do grow, where you actualize your potential, realize your goals, and where you feel deeply fulfilled, connected, and alive. So yeah, that's what I call the process of self-actualization.
yeah, and I just can speak from my own experience. Like, before we met, I think like 2.5 years ago, I literally had no clue what I was going to do with my life. I was living in Australia. Some of you may know my story. If not, you can listen to the Dharma Journey introduction that tells a bit about my journey. But I really met you, and I kind of, yeah, I really didn't know where I was going and who I really was. And I think big part of my gratitude to you is like having you on and really, you know, appreciating all the things that you've shared with me and how much you've helped me grow. And I really believe that for us to actualize our potential, a big part of it is having someone or having a community that really supports your growth and really believes in you. And yeah, you definitely saw my potential, and I didn't really even see it myself. And that's been such a big thing. And I really owe it a lot of my, you know, growth and, you know, building a business and doing all of this stuff that to you and to your kind of process. I mean, it definitely took me longer than 12 weeks. It took me 2 years, 2.5 years, and we're always growing. But I'm really grateful that I've had you in my life to share this incredible teachings. And I think for you, it's something innate.
If I may interrupt you there, because that's a very important point, just to get that confusion away, that actualizing your potential is like a 12-week process, like a lot of coaches and programs claim out there in the world, in this industry. Actualizing your potential is a journey for life. I think every new challenge in adult life is an opportunity to further stretch your potential and to get to know more about yourself. And that's something we experience in our relationship. Like, yeah, we have a beautiful, conscious relationship, and we fuck up a lot of the times, which is amazing because these fuck ups often, yeah, expose something that we don't know about ourselves yet. Sometimes it's in you, sometimes it's in me, and that's the same in our business. Like, currently at the moment, I'm growing my business, and yeah, definitely after that breakdown that I've experienced, I'm dealing with my own limitations, and it's just very interesting to see how it, like a very luxurious challenge, like a growth challenge, growing pain, exposes something that I'm not fully aware of yet in myself.
Yeah, and I think like I believe it's really hard to see our own shadows. It's a, like, we're gonna obviously share a bit about it, but for me, I think since being with you, and really obviously you having this awareness, and with love, sharing things that obviously maybe I was unconscious to and have been. And I think now, starting to, as you start to do a little bit of shadow work and start to really understand the things that are, yeah, like the holding you back from really thriving in life, and really knowing yourself on that deeper level. And I really think that since doing this work, and like you said, it's never ending. It's always we're always unpacking the layers, as we go on, which is the beautiful part of evolution. But I really, it's so incredible to have somebody that can hold that mirror in a loving space, and especially if you don't have one, maybe in a relationship, or maybe you have honest friends. But it's quite hard, I think, to see your own shadows. Like, that's why they're shadows. Maybe you can speak a little bit about that process. And
That's good. It's good that you say it, because we keep speaking about these shadows, but um, yeah, many people don't even know what shadows are. And when you say, yeah, it's really hard to see your shadows, that's right. Because when we speak about shadows, we speak about the things that we can't see, that we don't know, and that we can't see about ourselves. Um, and that do influence our emotions, our way of thinking, and especially our behavior. Um, and they're often hidden behind a lot of layers. And I often speak about they're often hidden behind our pride-based identity. And the more pride we carry in something, for example, I used to be the extreme entrepreneur. So the extreme self-esteem, um, it always has an opposite. And so that's one of the ways to identify the shadow already. Is like, whether you look in yourself or another person and says, hey, what are they identifying themselves with? So for me, it was the extreme entrepreneur, which comes like with a lot of courage and self-esteem. Well, what is the opposite of courage and self-esteem? It's the shame. It's like the insecure small little boy. And for other people, it's very interesting to see, like especially now in these new spiritual communities that we see, that all the love and the light. And yeah, I really invite them to first integrate the darkness and the rage that's there. And that's just what you see with people that really have integrated their shadows. It's they're not just one thing. They walk what I often call like the middle road, and where it's both love and light, and darkness and rage, and they can pendle between the two. So yeah, the shadow self is are the personality traits, the needs and desires that you're not really aware of. And I think it's maybe good to talk a little bit about, like, how does the shadow self grow? Like, how do we develop this shadow self? How does it occur? And because we all come to this world as very kind, whole, authentic human beings. And yeah, through the journey of growing up, especially like in the early years of our childhood, we start to divorce sometimes the good qualities and other times the bad qualities. And that's not necessarily because our parents are bad people and we need to start pointing at them. It's also because our parents have shadows that they are not aware of. But anyway, we as children, we walk through life, especially in the early years. We're just like we're like a sponge. Like, we don't learn by what our parents tell us. We learn by what we see. And so when one of our parents doesn't um, doesn't show any compassion to other people, then we start cutting off compassion to people, because we will always choose the acceptance of our parents, and in other words, the attachment over our own authenticity. And so it's through the relationship with our parents, but it also goes beyond that. Like, it's just what is accepted accepted, praised, and punished within the society. and that goes a long way. That's not only in elementary school, but just like society in general. And why is it that it is normal to use um, to fight and use violence in some cultures, whereas in other cultures it's not? And that has all to do is yeah, what is conditioned within us, and in that process, it doesn't mean, for example, that in a more civilized country, in a first world country, that people um, don't have this anger and rage and aggressiveness in their nature. It means that they have suppressed it or repressed it eventually in their personality, and it comes out in other ways.
And that's really interesting because I think, I mean, just doing this work on myself, and obviously, I can really only speak from my perspective, but a shadow that I see of myself or have seen in myself in the past was like this real area of competitiveness, and I definitely still have it, but all to the point where I would be, over jealous, very kind of competitive with other women, especially, and even in my friendship groups, I would purposely, unconsciously, but at the time, and now obviously I'm more conscious of it, put other people down because that would obviously give me some form of inferiority or make myself feel better. And that was such a big shadow. And a couple of weeks ago, I think I told you, a person that I know is like a friend of mine or was a friend of mine kind of did the same thing to me in a group of people, and it really triggered me. It really brought this like rage inside of my body, and I didn't react to it, but I afterwards I was going in my mind like on and on about it, and I was like, why the fuck has this triggered me so much? And then I reflected on it and did some kind of, yeah, speaking to you and about it, and I realized it triggered me because it's the shadow I have in myself that I hadn't fully understood because no one really had done that to me before in that way. And obviously this person did it to me, and then I realized, oh, okay, is this what I've been doing in the past to all these other people? And obviously, is that how I felt really small at the time? I felt really vulnerable and kind of, made me feel very like I was not very good enough. And yeah, that was definitely something that a lesson that I've kind of looked into, like, okay, this is a part of my personality. And obviously, do you find like when people start doing this shadow work, they start to get more easily triggered by other people's shadows because it's a part of their shadow as well?
Oh yes, for sure. Like in the beginning, that the hilarious part about shadow work, if you're unaware of your shadow, you're triggered too, but you don't know why.
Mm.
So a, a beautiful way is there's this saying is we project what we disown in ourselves.
Like that.
So that can be envy, that can be jealousy, but it can also be just like frustration and stuff. And so that's basically another way to identify the shadow within you. And what you're saying here is like, hey, you basically recognize the shadow in someone else. And without the awareness of your own shadow,
Mm.
it's just you see that person just as a bad person.
Yeah.
And a beautiful example that I sometimes see in see my clients is around anger. Is that they've learned at a very young age that they have labeled it that way. Is that like angry people are bad
Mm.
because someone in their family was maybe angry, and because of that, yeah, created a lot of distress. So they've labeled it as bad, but at the same time, they've divorced that emotion, that part of themselves. So their anger is not integrated. And whenever they see someone angry around them, it triggers a lot in them.
Mm. Yeah.
And that then comes the saying again, we project in this sense. So we project it on someone else who is angry. It has nothing to do with us, what we disown in ourselves.
Yeah.
Another example of one of my clients is an amazing woman, and yeah, she gets very triggered by seeing her daughter growing up, who is still super curious and bold. And the simple question is, of course, like, why does it trigger you so much? And obviously, it's her repressed desire, like it's and her repressed personality of like that curiosity is within her, that boldness is within her. But she's detached from it, she's divorced from it. And so the only thing that her daughter is doing is showing the mirror.
Yeah. Because we want to invoke that quality within us, or we have it within us, but we don't know how to embody it or bring it to the surface.
It is a repressed desire in the end. It's like, I think that I often speak about the word desire. It's the desire to bring that out. We have the desire to reconnect with a certain emotion. Mm-hmm. We have the desire to step into our full authentic being. So if that includes being curious or being bold, because that makes us feel whole.
And it's funny, like, I was going to speak about it in a bit, but since knowing this not so, I would say, nice part of my personality, kind of like the negative traits, you know, the light and the dark, and we all have them, and it's having that acceptance of it and really then starting to integrate it into our daily life. And now I really use it for empowerment and seeing how can I strengthen people's weaknesses, or how can I help people overcome anything that's, you know, holding them back on a physical or emotional level, and really using it to be like, okay, how can I use this this, I guess, superpower or strategy or coping mechanism that I've obviously, you know, learned from an early age that was disempowering, and how can I use this to now be empowering to serve my higher self instead of kind of the lower mind, the ego, that causes more separation and more feelings of disconnect.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to share a little bit about if you have any kind of like certain shadow aspects or qualities that, you know, we have inside of us that may come out when we're triggered, like manipulation, control, like the things that maybe we're not fully aware that we do.
Well, that's a very broad question, because there are many things that we do in order to not deal with it, with our shadow.
It's a small one.
Well, I think just the example that I was just speaking about, like it's looking at those pride-based identities, and this can be the identity of a person who is always the caretaker, the rescuer, the enabler, or whatsoever. And people carry a lot of pride in that because they see themselves as really good. But like, again, what is on the other side of the pride? Well, there's the shame, but the shame around what? And for example, for someone who's always stepping into that role and identifies himself or herself with that role of being that caretaker, or being the rescuer, or being the fixer, or being the enabler, on the other side, there's shame, and that's the shame around having needs.
Yeah.
And in order to integrate it, it's stepping into that shame, and that requires, of course, it requires awareness, but more so a very safe environment where you can open that up and start feeling that shame again, and find a more, well, a healthier way of dealing with that. And another pride-based identity is the one who's always like powerful, the one who's always one up, and the one who always wants to be in control. Those are traits that, again, is a pride-based identity, and people can carry a lot of pride in it, especially around that one. But again, it has a shame-based identity as well. The underlying emotion there is shame, and it's the shame around feeling helpless, around feeling small and powerless. And then another one is well, there's the one that comes up a lot is Mr. Nice Guy. That person that is always nice, that's always kind. Well, look in their faces and you can see that there's not only kindness. It is an identity that they step in order to get what they need. And the underlying shame for a person that is always kind and always compliant and always the easy one is actually wanting to express himself, is wanting to get to a certain place of acceptance where he or she can express her thoughts and feelings, where he or she can say no without feeling ashamed.
Mm. Yeah, I have a client at the moment, and she's like Mrs. Nice Woman, and I can see from like doing our shadow work together, it's like how that's actually turning into full resentment now, because the people just emotionally dump on her all the time because she's Mrs. Nice Person, and she's always there to, you know, help people, but then people, or she allows people to take advantage, you know. So, and then there's this built up resentment inside of her, which obviously is a big emotion when we have anger or resentment or fear, or like I know you spoke to the powerful thing. That's been a big one for me, is like I want to be in charge, successful, powerful, and then, you know, unpacking it, like understanding why is because I don't want to feel helpless, and I don't want someone to control me, or I want to not let anyone hurt me. So for me, like being successful or having money or having that status is a way to, yeah, to never feel small and helpless again. And yeah, starting to understand like the reasons why we have these shame based identities is actually like, the more that we understand it, I really feel like the more like compassion we can have for ourselves, because we were just doing the best we can with what we know, and now we know more, we can do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one we just cannot miss is well, the extreme entrepreneur or the perfectionist. And yeah, there's people that carry a lot of pride in that. Like underneath is just the fear of rejection, and
Mm.
and in the end, the desire to be loved for who they are. And and with all these examples, it's important to look at, hey, what is the underlying desire? And we just need to find more healthy and especially effective ways to get our to fulfill our desires again.
Yeah.
But we first need to become aware of them.
And speaking to that part of shadow awareness, because some of you guys may listen and be like, yeah, I know some of my shadows, or you may have had done some tools and stuff around it. But okay, so we can know about it. We can listen to this podcast. We can read a book. You know, we can Google whatever. But why is it so hard for us to integrate them unless you have a jordcuiper.com living with you, which makes it impossible not to? How can you start integrating these into your life, or why are they so difficult to integrate into your life? And then maybe a little tip on how you can integrate them into your life.
Um, well, I think the reason that some people integrate them is because they have to, because they've come to a point in their lives where they just um, they can't get around them anymore. They have to go through them, and that's I think, well, the hard thing about shadows, of course, what we've spoken of, it's around like the personality traits, the emotions and desires that we can't see, that we're not aware of. Um, and that is it. I think it's important to address like the four stages of learning that we have, which starts with the unconscious incompetence, where we are in complete denial. And it makes sense that in that stage is that we project it on others because we literally cannot see it in ourselves. So if we kind of make sense of what we feel, we just have a lot of emotions going through us, like we feel anger or we feel frustration or whatever, and then we just start looking around. It's like, okay, hey, who can I project it upon? Like, who's guilty? Why is it? And until it keeps happening and happening and happening and happening over and over again, for a lot of people, it needs to happen a lot of times, and then they go on to the conscious incompetence. And that is when they shift the focus from the external world, when they stop projecting to the external world and focus direct the focus more inwards. They start asking questions, or at least they start reading about self development, shadows, etc. And which is a really good thing, but it's nowadays it's also something to um, be aware of, because we can really get stuck in the amount of information. And it's it's the explicit learning, the explicit lessons that we get. So we learn from teachers, we learn from books, we learn from podcasts, YouTubes, whatever, what other people have to say, but we still don't learn about ourselves. We may start recognizing ourselves a little bit, saying it's like maybe certain examples that pop up in this podcast, and maybe you're like, yeah, I do recognize that I'm a perfectionist, and oh yeah, I understand now where it's coming from. But then we still move on, and we still continue um, to reenact that same pattern over and over again. And it's just because it's really, really hard to grow out of it, especially in the world that we live in, that where we are quite busy and quite overstimulated. And the more busy and overstimulated we are, the harder it is to get to our shadow, because um, we need to be in a calm state in order to feel safe, and we need to feel safe in order to get to our shadows, or in other words, to give ourselves a chance to integrate our feelings of shame. Um, anyway, from there on, like that's the second stage. So we become aware of our own incompetence. And when we become aware but we don't change, feelings of frustration start growing. And that's where we start to feel helpless, because now we're aware we're still acting in that same pattern. And some people um, keep treating that with like more courses, more information, as a sort of a painkiller, rather than really going into the problem. And that is something, and this is not a sales or marketing campaign for my work, but this is where I do the work with my clients. And when I speak about doing the work, it's really about going inwards. And we always work on what I call a primary area of focus in their lives, and which means a specific area in their lives where they experience a conflict, whether it's a conflict with the external world or with themselves, and where we start unpacking that so that they become radically aware of that pattern, but also that we can go to the repressed emotions and desires and start integrating them. And from there on, start moving forward. And something that's really, really important with shadow work um, is to work with specific situations in which the shadow is active, rather than trying to change it in like 10 different situations and everywhere a little bit. It's just picking one situation at a time. It's the same for setting boundaries or whatsoever. In the conscious competence, we need to use our conscious awareness in order to integrate a new behavior. And that just takes extreme focus, dedication, and time. And that's why it's so important to just work with one situation at a time, because that allows you to recognize it. Hey, now I see a pattern coming up, or now I feel that emotion going through my body. And with that awareness, you create an opportunity for yourself to respond in a different way. Or maybe at first to just not respond at all, and focus on listening to yourself and regulating instead of acting it out to the outside world.
Yeah, I love that as well. I think so many of us, and me and myself included, is when we are in this like doing mode, and we call it like high tone, our nervous system is just in that kind of state of fight or flight, which is the sympathetic nervous system. And this is a lot of the work that I do with my clients, is bringing us back into that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest, where we can really become the witness of the observer of our thoughts and our emotions, and then start to, through self-care practices, through yoga, meditation, breathing, and really, like you said, just being really conscious of how you want to implement change in your life, and doing it again and again and again. Like repetition is the key, I think. And yes, I think so many of us are in that state of like, I need to do more, I need to learn more. And I know I've noticed this in my life, like I always think I need more, when really it's just I need to slow down and actually integrate, which I think that's where the embodiment comes. And that's why I love, hearing you speak about it, because you really have like this embodiment with you in terms of going through, your shadows, and like they're always, I'm sure, coming up for you and like everyone, but really being able to notice them in yourself, and then from that place act. I think that's really a big place of like that integrity piece. A lot of people can talk about it, a lot of coaches speak about it, and a lot of people speak about it, but they're actually not embodying it, and they're not really fully integrating it into life. And that's why they keep reoccurring. These, maybe it's this different situation, different person, but it's the same underlying, root cause, roots pattern. Um, and until you fix, like you said, you just fix one situation, that has a ripple effect on other areas of your life. And how, like, can you give like maybe a couple of tips on how people can start to become more aware of this repressed, parts of our personality? Is it something like when you're triggered about someone else, that's a reflection of like where you're maybe doing this in your life but not aware of it, and you're projecting it onto others?
I think it's just first of all, I would say the first um, recommendation that I can give is just connecting back to the body. Like if we live these busy and overstimulated lives, we're often just disconnected from our bodies, so we don't even feel these emotions. So that's the first one. And well, probably people need to reach out to you and to know how to do that. But like simple practices of meditation and certain practices of yoga are very helpful for that. And other practices just of self-awareness could be journaling, could be a learning review, could be the wheel of life where you just check in with yourself to see how you feel and to answer a question about something that stressed you out. And just to generate that more self-awareness around like situations or people that trigger something in you, but then asking you the question, hey, what is it triggering within me? Because most of the time it's not the situation or the person in front of you, it's all within you. And I'm definitely not like that spiritual that I'm saying that everything is inside of you, because sometimes there are just like shitheads around that trigger you, and that's fair. But when something keeps occurring, where like, hey, why does that trigger me? Is that you actually spend time reflecting upon that. And another thing that I said is paying attention um, to what you identify yourself with. So where do you carry a lot of pride? And the different roles that we just spoke, like are you the independent one that doesn't need anyone? Are you the caretaker? Are you the powerful one? Are you the easy one? Are you the perfectionist? Are you the extreme entrepreneur? And just see where you carry a lot of pride, and that offers the invitation to to unpack that and see what's on the other side of that pride. Like what is the underlying shame there? Because every pride-based identity has an underlying shame component.
And what is something that when people start doing this work and integrating in their life, what are the benefits from experiencing learning about themselves on a deeper level and really putting it into practice? What's happened for you in your life since doing this work?
Wow, a lot. Mainly feeling. I think there's a beautiful the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, around shadow psychology, and where they explain like the transition from the boy psychology to the men's psychology, where the boy is the hero, and the hero thinks that he's indestructible, that he can do everything. And I was definitely in that role. I thought that I was the hero. I could do anything, and that's why I dated women that were well, missions impossible. And I remember my dad also saying like, you have the talent to attract the impossible. And that's why I always used to set goals that were very unrealistic to achieve. And because I wanted to prove something. And that's like the typical boy psychology. And the boy is scattered, it's flighty, it's very much in your face. And well, obviously for the man in the boy psychology, as I used to be, that those were feelings of restlessness, those were feelings of anxiety, and those were feelings of not being good enough, so like feeling insecure, and so a feeling of not belonging.
Mm.
And the beautiful thing of integrating your shadows and so transitioning into the king is that you're grounded, and that you're feeling calm, and and that you're feeling lots more acceptance and gratitude for everything.
Mm. You feel calm?
Yeah.
I love listening to you. I think Yeah, it's for me, it's really interesting, just I guess learning about it, and then we, like you said, we can learn about it and we can observe it, but really we have to to start doing the work, which is really uncomfortable. Like I have a few of my clients, and probably yours too. Like it's actually quite heavy. Like it's not nice. That's why I think so many of us avoid it. It's actually can be quite confronting because, like you say, we have so much shame around our manipulation, our control, our feelings of wanting to beat other people or be more powerful, or there's all these things inside of us that's like, these tendencies that we've suppressed that then we numb through addiction, through food, alcohol, drugs, sex, all of these things. That's ultimately where the shadow side will come out eventually, when we haven't been able to integrate it into our life. And that will manifest a lot of the time through addiction, and through this like compulsive behavior that overtakes ourselves, because we're just not in tune with ourselves and our body, and we have this so much shame that we need to suppress. And it's kind of like that never ending kind of, I know people in my life, like, that have suffered from a lot of shame, and then they're in this like spiral of like, okay, well, I have drugs and alcohol or sex or food or whatever to suppress it. And then they
Work.
what
Work. Just
work.
being busy.
Yeah, and then yeah, it's not always like big ones, but then it's like this vicious cycle of constantly needing something, or needing ways to distract ourselves, and we're constantly in this distraction of like social media. I know that's my guilty one, like, constantly being out there and externally stimulated, and that's also causing more, I think, disconnection from our body and our mind. And really, that purpose piece that I would love for you to speak about, because obviously it's the Dharma journey, and you told me the other day what you thought purpose really was, and I haven't really heard that. We sometimes think, and that was a part of me last year. I was like, oh, my Ayurvedic practitioner, like I'm helping people with their energy and their skin, and stress, and that's my purpose. And really, it's actually, that's also an identity. That's an identity, and it's not really necessarily a job or an end goal. And maybe you can speak to your definition of purpose, because it really spoke to me, and I really really value that.
Well, yeah, for me, it's not really just one, it's not one end goal. Again, the same as what we call purpose or self-actualization or enlightenment, all these things that we're seeking. I think as soon as we start seeking, we step out of our purpose, because we step out of the wholeness of this very moment. And as I mentioned, for me, actualization and living in purpose is to live in integrity with your needs and with your values and with your desires, which takes a lot of work, and it's just never ending. Because as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, is every new moment in life, every new challenge, every new job, every new relationship, every new stage of a relationship brings an opportunity for more purpose. And it's the purpose of being alive, of being whole and authentic. And that requires so much work. And as I mentioned, like it's the capacity to live in integrity with your human needs, with your unique values and with your desires. And the more work you do, and I want to say this from a place of self-acceptance, and not like, oh, you need to do more work, but the more work you do because of these experiences in life, the more you become in touch with your human needs, the more you become in touch, and the more clear you become on your unique values and the things that are so important to you. And the more work you do, obviously, the greater awareness you create around your desires. And if you integrate those and develop the capacity to live in alignment with those, then you create purpose. Then there is no goal. Then it doesn't need to be attached to a certain role you have into this world, because you will live from a place of wholeness. You will live from a place of authenticity. And by doing that's, I believe, is the greatest way in which you can impact humanity, because that in the end is what we're all seeking. And when we create things from a place of wholeness, it is purpose because we're doing good. From a place of wholeness, we don't do it for the ego. We will not take others down for our own success. We will not burn ourselves down to achieve a certain goal because we do it in harmony with our needs, with our values, and with our desires.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And just to finish it off, is there anything else that you want to share, or maybe you can share with the listeners your 3 favorite self-development books or shadow books that you can, they can start if they want to start learning a bit more about this and integrate it into life. What's been helpful for you? And
Something I wish to share is to encourage people to do the work from a place of self-acceptance and to trust the flow of life. And because um, there's so many coaches and influencers and everything out there that are encouraging people to do the work. And what I encourage you to do is to accept where you are and who you are at this point in life, and to give yourself permission to live and to enjoy, and to just take it one step at a time. That whenever you feel that something is happening in your life, maybe it's within your relationship, maybe it's within your career, where there's a conflict, when you that you take that as an opportunity to embrace it. But when you're working on that it is enough, and that you don't have to read all those self-development books and do all the courses and whatsoever. And because again, it's not a race, it's a marathon. And if you just keep listening to the lessons of life, you will develop exactly who you are supposed to be.
I hope.
I hope.
I hope. Yeah, for any of you who have enjoyed this episode, and obviously, Jord posts a lot of this kind of stuff on your Instagram. You're kind of going a bit more into that, sharing kind of how this, affects our life and like what things to look out for. I know you're big on boundaries and kind of sharing, your sessions and sharing kind of things you've learned along the way. But how else can people reach out? Kind of maybe you want to share a little bit about your program, and what that kind of entails for anyone that's interested.
Well, people can find me on Instagram indeed, at Jord Cuiper, JordCuiper. Yeah, and something like if you really feel called to doing the work, and that's often at a moment in life where you at some kind of breaking point where you realize that your current strategy, your current coping skills are just no longer working for you, or where you start to realize that they're working against you. I have a program that's called Vertus, and it's a 12-week program where we indeed focus on that, like the one area in your life where you are experiencing a problem, a conflict, or a challenge, and where we start unpacking that, and where we no longer focus on the external environment, but really start to look for the causation, the deeper cause of the challenge that you are experiencing, and where we discover the unexplored and repressed parts of your personality, and to eventually integrate them into your conscious personality, so you can go out in the world. Well, first of all, you can navigate through that challenge, and eventually go out in the world as a more whole and authentic human being.
Beautiful. And also maybe you can share about the hero's journey. I know that I don't know if it's fully booked yet, but I think there's one left or something.
Well, there's one slot open, and a few people that are kind of in or out. So it's fully booked, but it's the expedition to Peru in May. Hopefully we can go with COVID. Otherwise we go in September. It's an expedition that we have created, and I say we, my partner and I, Roderick, for people to explore and change from a place of inspiration and joy. So I often get people into my program where it's, well, not too late, but it's too late. They're already they're in pain, and some are even suffering. And we've created this experience, a 10-day hike in Peru through the mountains, to really connect back with ourselves, and to open up certain topics, and to do a little bit of the work, and hoping to inspire people explore and stretch their potential from a place of inspiration and joy.
Beautiful. Yeah, hopefully it's going to be on, if not in May.
It's going to be on either May or September.
Yes. And also, if any of you guys listening, if you just want to touch into the shadow aspect, I'm going to be hosting a 6-week program all about Ayurveda, how to, increase your energy, kind of reduce any stress, and really start to come from that place of wholeness, which has been a massive part of my journey and still is. And obviously, the shadow work's been really powerful for me. So Jord's going to be teaching one lecture on it on the 6-week program, and he's going to be helping us kind of uncover and unpack those. He's very good at seeing the things that we cannot see, and that's your kind of superpower, isn't it? You see destructive patterns.
It's a blessing and a curse. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a bit of a wizard, especially with your glasses on. You look more wizardry now. But yeah, that's going to be starting March 13th. And yeah, it's going to be an incredible way to kind of connect in with yourself. And I know so many people are suffering right now, with COVID and being stuck inside and kind of not being able to, connect with people. So this space is really there to connect with women only, unfortunately, if there's any men listening. But we'll have the opportunity to have this incredible man going to be guiding us through a little bit of our own shadows and how we can integrate them into our life as consciously as possible. So yeah, thank you so much for your wisdom, your time, and yeah, I love you lots.
Thank you. Love you too.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening, and see you next week on the Dharma Journey. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to connect with us, my Instagram is @BriarRoots, @the Dharma Journey. Please feel free to send us your favorite episode, and we'd love to hear your feedback. If you want to reach and connect with me further, I offer weekly women circles every Sunday, also Ayurvedic healing programs, consultations. So all of my details are at the bottom. Thank you so much for listening. This is really a part of the Dharma Journey movement to bring us closer together, connection, community, collaboration, and really inspire one another on our path towards liberation. Thank you so much for listening. Have an incredible day. I hope.